welcome back to another episode of the Main Quest podcast. This is, of course, the number one retro gaming podcast that puts the based in turn-based. This is episode 110. And as always, I am your host, Keith. I'm not f***ing around today. There's a lot to get to with this episode, so let's just do this. The podcast is supported by all of the wonderful people over on the Patreon. Tiers start at only $1 and includes bonus content like exclusive episodes, exclusive series, patron polls, written reviews, and early access to uncensored, ad-free, and main feed episodes. You want to hear that F-bomb that I just dropped like 10 seconds ago? It's $1. Link is in the show notes. Speaking of F-bombs, the reviews, sharing, social media, all that nonsense. I've got nothing else to truly plug, and you're only here for one thing, so why are we even f***ing around anyway? Matt is back. The Matathon continues, but it is the end of their tenure here on the show for now. This was an incredible discussion, and I'm grateful to have had them on for an episode like this. So go grab your favorite elixir or cuddle up with your giant chicken as we dive back into the Final Fantasy franchise.
Most things just fine. It still works pretty well, but like it's just on the edge of like its youngness. And so like certain AAA games don't run well, certain programs slow it down, it overclocks in certain ways. And so like I'm pretty much hanging on to dear life with this computer because I just bought a Switch 2 last month, and it's like a new computer is not in the cards anytime soon. So
at least you can use your PC to game. I mean, I just got my PC, 4 months ago. I actually had a friend help me kind of pick out my PC. And it's pretty beefy. I could probably run AAA games on mine. I don't know. Like I use my PC to work. You know, I don't use it to game really. So here and there's a couple like games that I have on Steam and stuff, which by the way, I played some Star Racer.
Hell yeah. What'd you think?
Recommend. Man, it's hard.
Oh my God, right?
It's like really hard.
Yeah. But wasn't I right about it basically being a new F-Zero?
Yeah. And the flying mechanic is really interesting. I really dig it. It's really like this it's like this risk reward system that it's really interesting.
It just apparently just went into, or is just about to go into 1.0, so you picked a good time to pick it up too.
Yeah. Should we start this thing? I mean...
Yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Matt, thanks for coming back on again. Of course, it's Matt Storm from the Fun and Games podcast and Reignite podcast. Welcome back. I'm happy you could make it twice in a row. The second person to do it twice in a row.
I was going to say, did Chris Copleen do 2 episodes in a row?
No, the only person to do 2 episodes in a row has been my brother.
Oh, okay. All
but
right.
Never 3. So there's still a record to be broken here.
Well... I mean, a little inside baseball. I know I will be back, but it's not consecutively. Right. So, that's okay. Totally cool. Look, you wanted to have a co-host for a month. I get it. It's legit. I'm just happy that you aren't sick of me yet. And F-Zero was a blast to do. So I'm excited to be back for another round at another SNES game.
Yeah. We should probably just get into this because I have a feeling this is going to be a longer episode.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Final Fantasy IV. Before we get into our previous histories, I want to preface, and you kind of already know because I've told you off air, Matt. I'm kind of bucking the regular structure of the podcast because I feel like it's, and I ran into this when I talked about Dragon Quest V, and I kind of had the same problem when I was talking about the first 3 Final Fantasy games, and that it's like, for whatever reason, I find it very hard to talk about an RPG in the structure of my show, only because they're more or less more story heavy. And I feel like the gameplay, there's just not enough there as far as the gameplay goes to really dig into. So for the structure of this episode, we're going to talk about our previous history in a moment here. But a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to kind of jump off of the development history of Final Fantasy IV. So what do I mean by that? We're going to dig into the development history, and I have it broken up into 8 sections. So I have it broken up. Part 1 is early development and a little bit of context. The second part is basically who worked on the game. The third part is going to be the game design and mechanical changes, which is that's a good example where we can just kind of jump off and actually start talking about what it's like to play Final Fantasy IV, right? And then this part we can talk about the story, jump off and talk about the story with the narrative design and themes. And then we've got audio and visual innovations. We have the release timeline and the different versions, so we can kind of talk about the ports and remakes and even sequels, which I did not know there was a sequel to this game until I did the research. And then we have localization and the version differences. And then we'll round things out with the influences that help create Final Fantasy IV and its overall legacy. And then, of course, we have a game. We're going to end things with a game and then our recommendations. So we're kind of be weaving in and out of all sorts of different areas here. This is the first time I've ever done something like this. So yeah, a little bit of experimentation here. We'll see how this goes. But of course, we're going to start with our previous histories. Why don't you kick us off first, Matt? What's your personal history of Final Fantasy IV?
So to give a little context, just because it's my first time appearing on your show talking about an RPG and Final Fantasy specifically, I got into RPGs actually not through Final Fantasy, but through Chrono Trigger, one of the best RPGs of all time. Some may say the best RPG of all time, but we can get to that later. And I had played that for the first time, really fell in love with it, and then started to dabble. I played Super Mario RPG. I wouldn't discover the Final Fantasy franchise really till 7, which is why it held so deeply to me, even though I know there are other games in the series that have better storytelling and better characters, whatever. That was kind of my first experience. And then I would go on to play the later titles. I wouldn't start really touching the classic titles until many years later. I played Final Fantasy VI, which was 3, on Steam, the Steam version, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. Really liked it, never finished it. Kind of fell off where the major midpoint catastrophe happens. I'll be vague just for the sake of it, even though that game is very old. But that kind of sparked my interest in the classic games, and then I've been dabbling with the Dragon Quest games and other games, and so like, though I've played a lot of classic RPGs, I had missed a ton of the SNES and PlayStation ones, and so now in the later years I'm going back. But my history with this game specifically is like what I read in magazines, but that was about it. I wouldn't actually play this game for the first time until several years ago. I believe it was 2023.
Oh, wow.
That I played it for the first time when the Pixel remasters came out. And so my experience with this game, I have watched streams of the classic game, and I did refresh my memory on the graphics and the sound just to know how it differentiates from the Pixel remaster and the improvements. But my full playthrough of this game was the Pixel remaster. And I fell in love with it. It has quickly become one of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and we'll get into why. But yeah, my experience was on the Nintendo Switch, and it took me about 25 hours to finish. I did some of the side quests, and I really enjoyed it. And I had always been curious about it in the SNES era, but like, again, when I think we talked about this in the F-Zero episode, I got my SNES very late. I got the Square SNES I started around the Donkey Kong Country era. So like these Final Fantasy games had basically come and gone by then. Like the new hotness was stuff like Chrono Trigger and Mario RPG and like the like in that way. And I played more platformers than anything else on the SNES. And so, yeah, my history with this game specifically, though I've played a lot of the Final Fantasy games over the years, is relatively recent.
Your last playthrough of this, is that kind of what you're coming to the show with? Was from the Pixel Remaster?
Mm-hmm. I've refreshed myself on some of the narrative beats and refreshed myself on just like, again, like the structure of the game, the characters and all of that. But I am basing my thoughts and vibes on that version.
Okay.
There is a world in which I wanted to try and play through the original SNES version, and I probably will still at some point, but I just actually 25 hours for this RPG is short by the standard of RPGs now.
Yeah.
Anyway, but still finding the time to replay the whole game. And again, this game has really stuck with me, so I feel like it's pretty fresh in the old noggin.
Yeah, and I just want to preface also before we actually start talking about the game, I am playing all of these games with the intention of playing them in how they were released back when they came out. And
right.
So I have the I do have the original Japanese ROM of this game on my Super Nintendo Mini. And I do have I forgot what the name of the patch is. It's like a famous translation patch. I want to say it's called like the Hemingway patch or something like that. Or I don't remember specifically. But I patched it and it was not working, and I don't know why. Because my patched Final Fantasy V ROM works perfectly fine on my SNES Mini. This wasn't working. I don't know why. I don't know what happened. I could have put the Final Fantasy II, the like version that like actually came out here in the US, and played that, but that also isn't like exactly faithful to the original Japanese game either. So the closest that I could get was also the Pixel Remaster. Fortunately, I have all of those because I'm a freak and have multiple versions of the same game. So I did play that, but for reference, as far as like the visuals go, looked up gameplay and stuff just to compare what the visuals were then to what obviously the Pixel Remaster looks fantastic. Obviously that holds up great, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, just full disclosure there. I did have to end up playing the Pixel Remaster for this, so which is still pretty close to the 1991 version that we got, so.
Yeah, it's not a huge difference from what I've been told. Like, there are obviously graphical improvements and music improvements and stuff, and there are things you can turn on and off that, like, turn off random battles or, increase the speed of stuff. Like, those are the quality of life stuff they've added, but they're optional, and you can easily play without them.
Yeah, right. And I did not play with that stuff on, and we'll get into that we'll get into that a little later, because there were some times where I was really kind of banging my head against the wall. For 25 hours, that's even short for this franchise in general.
Yep.
Even compared to the first three games where there's an insane amount of grinding that has to be done. So 25 hours, not too bad. I would probably guess I was right around the same mark. I don't know off the top of my head. But in general, I mean, it's a pretty breezy game to play through. But my previous history, that's what we were talking about, right? We've kind of alluded to it. I mean, this is like where the chronology of the games get all messed up here in the United States, right? Until 7 comes out. So I guess just as a reminder for the casuals, this game was released as Final Fantasy II. And back when I covered the actual Final Fantasy II, you wouldn't believe how many people were confused. They had no idea what game I was talking about.
Yeah.
And then I covered Final Fantasy III, and then they were still confused, which was crazy. I'm just gonna say, like, it's 2025 when you're listening to this. It might be a lot later. If you're still calling Final Fantasy VI Final Fantasy III, grow up.
Yeah.
Same with this game. It's Final Fantasy IV. Like, we're beyond the naming conventions at this point. Americans, we're starting to learn. We're starting to heal. I know we've been wrong about things all along. But anyway, Final Fantasy IV. I mean, when this when this came out, I played it and then I forgot about it, mainly because this was like a rental and RPGs were very hard to finish in a weekend. I think the store that I rented games from, it was 3 days for games and 5 days for movies, if that's correct. And this was also like prior to me really getting into RPGs. So I never really bothered renting this probably more than once or twice. Honestly, It may have been a one or done thing. But then Final Fantasy VII got announced. It was getting advertised. It looked really cool. And I was like, oh man, I should go play the other ones before this. And this was also around like 1996. Emulation was really starting to take off. And I mean, the internet was just it was, you had to be there type of thing. Like just finding out information on like any type of games or even current games that were out. And then even just looking for emulators and the files that could be played on those emulators. It was crazy. Like if you think the Final Fantasy II translation is bad, which it's okay. When I say Final Fantasy II, I mean the one that we got here in the US. I'm sorry. It's already confusing.
Yep.
So if you thought the US version was like a bad translation, just like be 13-year-old Keith fighting a translation patch that probably isn't a virus and then applying it to the ROM that you have. And like all of a sudden, like Cecil's throwing out swears and stuff and he's racist for some reason. Like it's just, those patches were like horribly dated and it was just trash. It was very embarrassing. And so translation patches, like all that stuff, I mean, it's amazing how far that they've come. Like the people that actually care and take the time to translate these games. So I got my Super Nintendo emulator up and running, got all the files, learned how to put those horrible patches on. And then I played Final Fantasy IV and I was like, wait a minute. I've already played this before. And that's how I learned how Final Fantasy games were released here in the US and how, yeah, America, we got Final Fantasy II, but it was actually Final Fantasy IV. Same thing happened with 3, where like we didn't get that. So it was just like really like this intense learning experience where I was finally getting into, and I would say Final Fantasy is up there as one of my favorite franchises. So I was really digging into the franchise, getting into it, and then also learning emulators and stuff like that, which is a very contentious thing even to this day. And so, yeah, I mean, this is one of my first real Final Fantasy games that I played through. Was it my first? No, that was Mystic Quest. And we don't need to talk about Mystic Quest right now. We can talk about that a little bit later. So, yeah, it was just a crazy, crazy time for 13-year-old me. And then fast forward to a story that I've kind of already told in previous episodes, but in case you don't know, Matt, I began a playthrough of the entire series back in 2014. One that I have not completed. I stopped at Final Fantasy X like 5 years ago, and I fell in love with Final Fantasy IV again around that same time. So this game did a lot. I feel like I've been ranting a lot at this point, but yeah, I mean this game may have formed a lot of my personality.
I mean, I totally get that. I mean, like I mentioned, Chrono Trigger, which I think is the best Final Fantasy game ever made. Cue every Final Fantasy fan getting mad. Chrono Trigger is basically my whole personality. It's one of the games I talk about probably as much as Mass Effect, if not more, and it's my favorite game of all time. And so I get that, right? Like especially like back then, like there's something about experiencing an RPG in your teenage years or even younger that like for me, I think it was with Chrono Trigger, I didn't realize you could tell stories like that. Like I was kind of completely blown away that storytelling existed that way. And I can see Final Fantasy IV doing the same thing because it also has a really well done story. Like you kind of realize, oh, it's not just jumping on things. We can tell artistic narratives here.
Well, also, I mean, there's a connection with Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger because a lot of the staff that worked on Final Fantasy IV went on to work with Chrono Trigger, which is something we can bring up a little bit later at the end of the episode. start here with the early development for a little bit of context. So, of course, Final Fantasy IV is a role-playing game developed and published by Square Soft. And so, man, Final Fantasy 1 through 3, those games were developed and released within like 2.5 years. Like they pumped those things out. And Sakaguchi, God bless that man, because even he was like, man, Final Fantasy 3 was kind of some bullshit. And I'm like, yes, I wholeheartedly agree. I love that game, but Final Fantasy 3, the end game, is notoriously difficult. I don't know how familiar you are with Final Fantasy 3.
I've never played it. It's one of the few classics I've never played, actually.
Okay. I'm not going to spoil anything. I'm also probably going to bring up some Dragon Quest V comparisons. And I know that you also have not played that game, and so I'll try not to spoil anything for those. But to be fair, and you kind of tiptoed around some things earlier, Matt, Final Fantasy IV is old as hell. Like, if you clicked on the podcast and it says Final Fantasy IV on it, we're talking about Final Fantasy IV. So if you're like waiting till now and you're like, oh, now I want to go play it, well, then just go play it and then come back. Hopefully come back, you know? But yeah, Sakaguchi was like, man, we could really refine what we did with Final Fantasy III, except the job system. We'll do that for Final Fantasy V. And not that they didn't like the job system. He thought it was a little bit, in his words, bloated. And so Final Fantasy IV, from conception, was basically intended to correct the design frustrations from Final Fantasy III. The most interesting thing that I found out about the development of this game is that this was actually a split development between this and Final Fantasy V, and that this was originally supposed to be a Famicom game. And, you know, I talked about how they basically pumped out Final Fantasy 1, 2, and 3 within like 2.5 years, right? Like, this feels like they were just kind of trying to catch up with edicts, because Dragon Quest was about to put out Dragon Quest V. And so I can't imagine all the setbacks. Like, they intended to change this game entirely, but I don't know how successful they would have been had Final Fantasy IV actually came out on the Famicom.
Yeah, it's a curious thing. I mean, we talk about the dev history on your podcast. I'm always kind of blown away. Like, I remember that time, but also I wasn't as like aware or as active in the gaming community as far as like an enthusiast in the way that I am now, where I track dev cycles, can't wait for games to come out, no release dates. And so, like, you know, most games get most franchises get one game per console generation at this point. You know, you look at the Spider-Man games and stuff, or how Final Fantasy VII Remake, Rebirth, and whatever the third one will have each debuted on a separate PlayStation console, because I'm not convinced the third one's coming on the 5 at this point. And so, like, it's just kind of wild to know how many games they put out so quickly for this. I mean, but you also think about it, like, Final Fantasy, though it's a little bit of a misnomer, basically it's named Final Fantasy because they were pretty convinced this was like their only hit. Like, if this didn't do it, it was going to be their final game. And once it did do well, they were like, oh, well, now we got to keep making them, and like wanted to ride that wave too a little bit, because they were probably worried that if they didn't stay in people's consciousness, they could be forgotten or disappear, or who knows what, right? I mean, there's not the same kind of ubiquity with video games then that there is now. Like, back then, you know, you had magazines and other things, but you couldn't just like look up release dates or go online in the same way you can now to know exactly what's coming. So I think there was a little bit of wanting to compete with Enix, irony in that, of course, and then wanting to like just stay in the zeitgeist, right? You know, they're the next big RPG franchise, and they want to stay that way, right? By constantly putting out hit after hit.
Yeah, it's and Sakaguchi has stated in the interviews that early on, when he was getting pressed on why Final Fantasy IV for the Famicom was canceled, he kind of played coy, you know, didn't really want to talk about it. But much later on down the road, he's basically has not been hiding the fact that he's upset at what happened, and so potentially it was some sort of shift in like a business decision or something, maybe investor driven. Who knows? I mean, I guess some things never change at Squaresoft, right? Like,
Yeah.
it seems like there's always been some sort of mismanagement going on. Also, not the first time they were working on multiple Final Fantasy games at the same time either. So yeah, ultimately, yeah, the Famicom version of Final Fantasy IV got shit canned. And so Final Fantasy V basically became, from my understanding, it's very confusing. From my understanding, Final Fantasy V became 4, and then 5 became a whole other separate thing. I could have timelines mixed up. I was really racking my brain over this. One of the abandoned concepts, actually, for the original Final Fantasy IV was kind of something that they ended up using for Chrono Trigger. Like, there was a prototype of Final Fantasy IV that had Akira Toriyama on it. He was involved. And then, yeah, obviously that stuff got worked into Chrono Trigger. I think they even said elements would even go into Secret of Mana. So a little bit of interesting tidbits there.
Yeah, totally.
And amazing that like this early on, they were already, talking with Akira Toriyama, and amazing that like there's a little bit of cross-pollinating between Square and Enix there. Getting into our second portion here, and this is also, people are probably wondering, where are the retro recollections? We're going to get into that, actually. I'm going to sprinkle these throughout the podcast here. But before we do that, the core team for Final Fantasy IV, if you're a returning listener from those first 3 games that I covered, you're going to hear these names a lot more as we go on through the Super Nintendo era here. So we've got the director, of course, Hironobu Sakaguchi. We have the programmer and the active time battle inventor, which we'll talk about talk about the ATB system coming up. Hiroyuki Ito, the scenario and event planner, Takashi Takeda, composer, of course, Nobuo Uematsu, needs no introduction. Of course, again, somebody else who doesn't need any introduction is the character designer and concept artist, Yoshitaka Amano. The lead sprite artist, Kazuka Shibuya. Final Fantasy IV is, if it's not known for basically fixating the entire franchise on like one specific type of gameplay, it is also known for its horrible crunch culture. Uematsu stated in an interview that he worked 14 months nonstop to get the score done. Sakaguchi also reminisced on how the staff were sleeping in chairs. They would bring cots to the office, and they pretty much worked day and night without even like seeing daylight. Again, I feel like a lot of this is them trying to catch up to Enix, so they're trying to probably make some sort of deadline. So we're going to hear from our first community member as far as retro recollections go. We've got Phil from Deleted Says, who says, "This was my first ever role-playing game and JRPG all in one. This is the game that brought me into the genre and gave me my love for it. It is one of my quote-unquote foundational games and showed me there was more to games than crappy platformers and beat-em-ups, and one of the games that kept me interested in the hobby probably long enough after I should have found something else to do. But in all seriousness, while this game certainly has its limits in age and scope and mechanics, and there are other Final Fantasy games that are far more beloved, and a number of those I will vehemently and vociferously disagree with others on, for their themes, graphics, and complexity, this is my Final Fantasy. I still love it, and it's still a very worthy title in this series. Thank you, Phil. And of all the things that I f***ed up on, as far as reading your retro recollection, it was not well, now I f***ed up. Vociferously.
Now you can't.
Yeah. Now I can't take that title.
Look, you know what, Phil? Just because you're smart and smarter than us, you got to use your big words, and we love you for it, but still.
Yeah, man. So all said, I mean, despite all of the crunching that they did with this game and the cancellations and stuff, Final Fantasy IV was a commercial success when it released. It did not outsell Final Fantasy III, and it actually barely did better than the first Final Fantasy. So I guess my question for you is, does it even make sense that the team had to crunch so hard on this game?
I mean, no. I mean, I think it wouldn't have mattered how much it sold, really. Crunch is such a can of worms. Like, I still haven't played Red Dead Redemption 2 because of the crunch at Rockstar, which was my choice. I don't judge others for, but like, you know, of course, when we were kids, we didn't really know any better. And even knowing now, like, we don't have full transparency into crunch culture in gaming. Some studios are honest about it. Some studios have, or reporting has come out about certain studios, but we still only know like a fraction of how much it still happens. But yeah, I mean, I guess it's the business, right? Like, I can't imagine it's the developers or the head of production or the like anyone on the ground floor making the game that wanted a crunch. I am sure there was pressure from the executive, you know, C-suite level of it. If I had to guess, I don't know, because this is a Japanese studio, could be different over there. This is a very Western mentality, right? Blame the guy at the top kind of a thing. But I have to imagine there was some pressure somewhere, because also, as we've seen with Square Enix over the years, just because something sells a lot doesn't mean it hit their numbers. Like Guardians of the Galaxy sold really well, still didn't hit their numbers. Final Fantasy 16 and Rebirth had some massive numbers, but still didn't hit their projections, right? So like, there are a lot of things here on the back end that I can't speak to with any amount of like authority or expertise that could have influenced that. But it definitely doesn't feel like it was necessary right now as we look back, because the other titles were such huge hits, and this only just about sold as much as one of their lowest selling of the three. Is just like, it does make you wonder.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about my Dragon Quest V episode, and I had to give a little bit more of historical context to Enix because it was my first Dragon Quest game that I was covering on the show. And there I mentioned just how much of a behemoth Enix was in the 80s and the early 90s. And I mean, looking at the numbers here, I mean, Squaresoft with Final Fantasy IV barely even made a dent compared to Dragon Quest IV and Dragon Quest V sales. Enix was massive in Japan. So for the numbers specifically, Final Fantasy IV sold 1.8 million copies in Japan, but that was behind Dragon Quest IV's 3.1 million, which is also Final Fantasy IV barely did half as much as Dragon Quest V later did, which is absolutely insane. And like the Final Fantasy franchise they did well in Japan. It was more of a thing here in the US, and obviously it would become a bigger thing here in the US. And I think, for better or worse, they started catering to us a little bit more than they did to the Japanese players. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to look in hindsight and be like, yeah, man, I don't know, like Nobuo Uematsu did not have to sleep on his desk to help get this game out or anything like that. I don't know, it's just very hard to wrap my mind around where they're just like, yes, we need to get this game out. This needs to do Dragon Quest numbers, especially when they were seemingly working so close with Enix at the time. It's crazy to think about.
Do your podcast feel underleveled? Sick of content that doesn't overclock your ear holes? Crack open a cold can of Hell Piss Zero Mercy. It might sound like an energy drink, but it's actually the Main Quest Patreon attacking your nervous system. For less than the cost of a loose copy of Perfect Weapon, you'll get bonus episodes recorded in an abandoned KB Toys. Early access to episodes before you even know you want them. Listen as your host Keith researches and revisits and re-evaluates retro games with a mix of sarcasm, sincerity, and that thing scientists call good podcasting.
No actual scientists are consulted in the making of this podcast. Good podcasting is not a medically recognized condition, and any resemblance to sincere analysis is purely coincidental.
We gave the Main Quest Patreon to a test group. We're still sorting out the consequences.
Ever since I joined the Patreon for the Main Quest podcast, Keith has unleashed the beast in me. Ever since the Primal Rage episode, I now go to random children's birthday parties in an inflatable T-Rex costume to brighten their day. And if
The Patreon gave me emotions. I do not want them. Please kill me.
It's okay to like a video game.
Join that before the algorithm bans it for being too powerful. Link in the show notes. Or scrawl Main Quest in blood on your nearest Wii U gamepad and whisper Keith 3 times into the mic.
Hell Piss trademark has not been evaluated, approved, or acknowledged by any real government agency. Side effects may include stick drift, polygonal hallucinations, involuntary bricking, aggressive XP drip, LAN party flashbacks, emotional damage caused by hot takes, spontaneous quick time events, and a strong desire to rank every Gex game. Do not consume if you are pregnant, wear deodorant, or currently dating. Contact Dr. Mario if symptoms persist. May permanently overwrite your taste profile. Void where prohibited. So for the third section here, we're going to talk about the game design. We're going to talk about the game design and basically the changes that were made for better or good here. You know, you said you weren't familiar with Final Fantasy III, correct? Did you play Final Fantasy V?
No. So it's funny. I played Final Fantasy IV. This was a couple of years ago. I went onto Twitter before it was as much of a shithole as it is now. It was always kind of one. And I was like, look, I want to play some classic Final Fantasies. I skipped over them except for the small portion of 6 I've played. That's not true. I played 1 on the NES and it's awful and will remain awful. It's a bad game. It's not fun. It's bad. It was important, but it's bad. But I was like, I've heard not great things about 2 and 3. They're hit or miss. Where should I start? Should I start with 4? If I want to play 4, 5, and 6, should I do them in order? And many of my friends were like, look, if you're going to do specifically 4, 5, and 6, play them in order because they get better as they go. And I started 4 with the intent of then to buy 5 and 6 and play them, and I never got around to it. But yeah, the classics, I only played 1. Couldn't figure anything out, as most people could without a guide or some kind of internet at the time. Like I played it way back when, and I will at some point probably buy the Pixel remaster because I have to imagine they've made it at least a tiny bit easier. But so I don't really like, I know that the class system is in 3 and 5, right? Like they skip the class system in 4, but both 3 and 5 have like the customization with the classes. So I know that much, but like beyond that, I don't have a huge grasp on what 3 does differently from all the other games.
So are you familiar with the job system?
Yes, absolutely. I've watched, I've watched Chris do the Job Fiesta stuff with 5. I've watched other people stream those games. So like I've seen them in action. I'm just not intimately familiar with it. And then like I've played the MMO 14, which, also has the class system though in a very different way, but still a lot of the same job classes that were in those classic games. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy IV in comparison is way more straightforward than Final Fantasy III and of course Final Fantasy V. So earlier, I mentioned that Sakaguchi thought that the job system from 3 was just a little bit too bloated. One of the other reasons why he wanted to switch from the job system is because they could tell a better narrative with Final Fantasy IV. And so there was like a player agency shift where Final Fantasy IV wasn't going to be about your build or your loadout, because as much as I love Final Fantasy IV and the way the battle system works, Final Fantasy III and Final Fantasy V feels more like an RPG to me. It feels like you can really customize your character based on whatever you want to make them out to be. Final Fantasy III does some weird stuff with like you really need a specific loadout for specific dungeons, and so that way kind of takes away that freedom from you. Again, Final Fantasy V really refined all of that stuff. Like that's really like the ideal job system. Final Fantasy IV doesn't do any of that. Instead, the characters are kind of locked into their archetypes. Like, you still have a dragoon, right? Kane, you're a dragoon. You still have a bard, right? You still get a white mage. And the characters still have like skills. So like Cecil, who starts out as a dark knight. One of his skills is like this, I don't remember what it's called. It's like a dark knight attack or something. But then eventually when he turns into a paladin, he's able to use white magic. So that stuff is still here. You just don't really have any real control over it. And as you level up your characters, of course, their abilities, they just naturally get stronger as the numbers go higher. So yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you how you liked. Well, I mean, you are familiar with the job system, so I guess I can still ask you the question. I mean, how do you like this just linear progression as opposed to kind of having agency over a party that you're creating?
It's funny, the irony in that. And so I wouldn't play D&D pretty regularly till I was in college, which is what, of course, classic Final Fantasy is basically based on. My first, like I said, my first like really deep RPG was Chrono Trigger, where everyone had their assigned class and you unlocked magic for them and they all had their assigned elements. Then Mario RPG, same deal, right? You have a tank, you have a fighter, you have a healer, you have a mage. I don't know what you classify Geno, but anyway, like assigned characteristics. Again, the first Final Fantasy I played was 7, same deal. Like that was overly customizable in the sense that like with the materia, magically you could do whatever you wanted, but there were some characters who were ranged attackers, melee, better casters. Like most of the RPGs I had played in my youth had what 4 has. So to me, I love this because it's reminiscent of the games I grew up playing, whereas I didn't play it in the order. So for me, like, while I would admit that like a lot of the RPGs I love now as an adult, playing even Dragon Age and Mass Effect where you get to choose a class and like customize it, like I love doing that. But to me, that's the special alternative. So it's just kind of funny. So yeah, for me, like for going back to it so I played it in the summer of 2023. I was like, oh, this is like Chrono Trigger. You know, it's each character has a class, and then like, and you mentioned like, Cecil becoming a paladin. God damn, that was so cool. We'll talk about it like narratively later, but like to get like a whole different kind of character class, like to evolve it that way was fun and to tie it to the narrative. So yeah, I really dug it. I like choosing classes and overly customizing a character, and like, you know, I love a good character creator and all of that. But I think because my classic RPG experience is more tied to characters having assigned skills and classes and like railroaded progression, for lack of a better word, I was pretty used to it and I didn't really bat an eye at it.
Yeah, it's really good at, this game is really good at throwing like very subtle tutorials at you too.
Yeah.
Because it's good at encouraging you to learn through its design. And they're not like overt tutorials. Like the Mist Dragon, for instance, is basically your ATB tutorial.
Yep.
A little bit about the ATB system since we're talking about it. Again, developed by Itoy, was something that he revised 4 or 5 times because, ironically, what Final Fantasy would become, he thought that it felt too close to an action game than an RPG. But yeah, I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is still a turn-based RPG. The ATB system just means it has a dynamic timer, which means that at a certain time, the enemy's going to attack, and then that timer resets, and then you have a certain time to attack, timer resets. And so it puts a lot more pressure on you to make your decisions quicker before the enemy can act. And so you really need to learn how to adjust on the fly. It's a system that literally like 95% of RPGs use today.
Yeah.
So back to the Mist Dragon tutorial, it's literally teaching you that like, hey, there are times when you need to act and you need to act now. And there are times where you need to just sit back and let the enemy do their thing. And that's like something that, again, this is the first game that has ever used this kind of system. And then even just outside of the ATB system, like there's the cave where you can't use like your metal weapons and armor. I think it's just like the magnet cave, right?
Yeah.
But the magnet cave really takes away a lot of your ability to just physically attack and take hits. And so that's a good part of the game early on to be like, hey, this is how to use magic. These are weaknesses that you need to learn. And this is how you utilize MP.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was the start of like in-game tutorial through narrative, which is really interesting. Like even when Cecil becomes the paladin, like that's a battle, one of those classic, like you're fighting yourself battles, but like how to win is not obvious. But if you listen to the dialogue, it tells you how to win that fight, but only if you're paying attention to the dialogue and the story, which I really love. I love that they not necessarily penalize you for like button mashing, but like they do want you to pay attention to the narrative. And even these tutorials of these kinds are kind of woven into like the moments, events, and narrative of the game.
Yeah. And I think it's like, so for like new players, it's a very good way of being able to learn those systems. But like even for longtime fans of the franchise playing this, where you had that dynamic freedom to kind of build your party into whatever you want. Even like in Final Fantasy 1, you're still kind of creating your own party. Like right up front, you're like, okay, I want a red mage, a black mage, a monk, and a knight. And then you just kind of go off and do your thing in the game. And then Final Fantasy 2, you're building your character through punching yourself in the face and using magic and stuff. Have you played Final Fantasy 2?
No, like I said, the classics I played 1, but not
okay.
2 or 3.
Yeah, okay. So that you don't get the punching yourself in the face reference. That game is stupid. And then of course Final Fantasy 3 with the job system. So you've gone these 3 games doing this stuff, and then you get to Final Fantasy 4 and like all that control is kind of ripped from you. So it's good to have these tutorials, but it's also like, as far as like the dungeons go and stuff like that stuff was like designed around the fact I don't want to even say the ATB system, but just the shift in player agency is completely gone. I'm just overly impressed just by the dungeon design and how the character building works and how they come in and out of the party, and how you're never really stuck in the game like you were in those previous 3 games, especially in Final Fantasy 3, where it was like, hey, you've been working up to this, knight status with this one character for the entire game, but guess what? You need a dragoon. Sorry. Like it's just one of those things where it's just like, yes, the Final Fantasy 4's mechanics are very fine tuned, and I think it's probably one of like the most underrated aspects of the game is that, like, yeah, on the surface, very simple, but when you actually dig into what they were trying to do, it's pretty ingenious.
Yeah, I mean, I think also like when you talk about the party members coming and going mechanically too, like I like that it frees you up to like try different things. It's frustrating when like Tella leaves and you've like maxed out some of his spells, and then you get these two brats who, I know what I'm saying, that's a retracted statement in the narrative, but at that point that you get them, you're like, what are these two kids? And their magic is split between them? What the hell? Right? Like it's meant to mess with your expectations a bit, but I love it. And like, I know that's a common complaint is like, oh, you can't control who comes and goes. Like that's RPGs, baby. I don't know. Like to me, that's what makes a good RPG, when things in the narrative complicate how you play it mechanically, right? Characters leaving or dying or right, all of that stuff I think is really important to RPGs. And I think that parties being inconsistent, maybe having a core character or 2 who are always there, but then everyone else coming and going is kind of exhilarating, because it means that you're like, it changes things up. You don't just expect, all right, well, I have these classes up. If they leave, well, I'll just use that class on someone else, right? Or whatever. Like you can't do that. Like if your magic users leave, which at one point they do, it's like, well, I guess I can only use the limited magic I have with these other characters. And like, I kind of like that it kind of puts you in those positions sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there was, for the most part, there are like maybe at any given time, 2 or 3 party members that will kind of always be there for the most part.
Yep.
And I did towards the end of the game just kind of fall into a rhythm, kind of doing the same thing with those like 2 or 3 characters. Like, so there were certain roles where I was like, yes, you are very clearly this one thing, so that's how I need to utilize you. Then again, I've been playing games like these for a very long time, so it might have been more obvious to me than it would be somebody else coming into this fresh-faced. But we've been kind of dancing around the narrative here and stuff like that, and so I think you gave us a good segue, and our next retro recollection also gives us a great segue, and it's from J Clocked, who says, I first played the Naming Way fan trade. There it is. Naming Way. I said Hemingway earlier. Pretty close.
Yeah, I'm close. Yeah, almost there.
Yeah. I first played the Naming Way fan translation a few years ago. I loved it. The way it forces your party lineup due to circumstances in the story, I feel like allowed the characters to feel very characterized and distinct. And they had so many impactful moments, like Cecil turning into a paladin, or Palom Porum, Tella, etc. I'm surprised more JRPGs haven't done the forced party lineup for chapters of the story. Thank you, Jay Clocked. Also a new community member. Welcome aboard.
You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, Jay Clock, but welcome. Welcome to the party.
So yeah, let's get into the next section, which is basically just going to be talking about the narrative and the story. So if, again, for whatever reason, if you're not mad already that you found out Cecil turns into a paladin, I'm sorry. Check out the show notes for the timestamps. You can skip this section if you want. A lot of the reason for the party members going in and out of your party was because Sakaguchi wanted to focus so much more on story. He wanted this to be cinematic. He wanted it to be character driven, which those first 3 games, not either one of those things. It's very basic. I will say I do enjoy the fact that this still feels like a culmination, as far as the narrative goes, feels like a culmination of those first 3 games. Because those first 3 games is like, we need to go get the crystals before the bad guy does. Right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of what this game is.
I mean, the crystal thing isn't going anywhere anytime soon in this franchise.
Right. Well, it disappears a little bit in the middle there.
That's true. Yeah. But I mean, it's just they just call it something else. It's all the same stuff. Like, it represents the same stuff. The planet, the world, the energy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, to some degree. Those games, Final Fantasy VIII doesn't exist without the influence of this game and how much they wanted to focus on character. Because even though this is your typical crystal story at the end of the day, it's focusing way more on those characters, which those other games did not have at all.
Yep.
I mean, they kind of did a little bit, but Final Fantasy III had some okay narrative, but it was still incredibly basic, especially compared to this. And so part of the narrative is really driven by the fact that you're forced to lose party members and gain party members, depending on what's actually happening in the story. I guess my question for you is a lot of that stuff earned? Because I don't want to give away my complete thoughts right now, but I think that stuff was kind of put together. Mechanically, it works great. Story-wise, I think it's a little haphazard.
I'm of 2 minds about it. So, I mean, remember what I mentioned my favorite RPG of all time is. There's a lot of heartbreak in that game, especially depending on how you follow that story. And so I like that. I like emotional beats. I mean, again, if you follow me anywhere online, you've seen me rave about Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which has a ton of heartbreak in it. It's a game basically about death within the first 10 minutes. So, like, I like that, and I'm emo at heart, MCR all day, baby. So that stands for My Chemical Romance. Some of you youngins might not remember them, but they're back. They're doing a reunion tour. Anyway.
And they're in pog
No, but
form.
like,
Sorry, that's a Simpsons reference for you young folk.
That is, exactly. Well, it's still on, so, for better or worse. So, yeah, I like the narrative beats here. I'm a sucker for self-sacrifice and self-reflection, and a lot of the narrative beat changes or characters disappearing. Like I love Tella. I think he's such a bizarre character for an RPG, right? Like a bitter old man trying to protect his daughter, angry. Like, of course, the famous Spoony Bard line, but that aside, like that whole everything with him and Edward, I think is like, it can be read as kind of cheesy, but I think it's actually quite masterfully done and like adds stakes, right? Because it gives these characters, like Edward seems like a coward and useless, and then he does some incredible stuff. Like, I think while it does feel like it's in service of we can have a big impactful moment, I do think they're earned in the sense that they do fit the character arcs. I mean, Parm and Porum, that moment in the shrinking room, like huge. I was like, my mouth was hanging open. I couldn't believe it that they would let characters sacrifice themselves in that way. And like, it's funny too, because the irony of like talking about death in Final Fantasy, and I guess I'm still going to dance around some of the most famous spoilers in the history of RPGs, but like stuff that happens in 7 and stuff that happens in 10 and stuff that happens in Chrono Trigger, like those are some of the best moments in RPGs. I think character death, when done right, is important, right? Losing someone you've spent all this time with, especially if they're letting you play as them and then they take them from you. In a world where you just get a phoenix down and they're back alive, but no, not this time. And that's even worked into the narrative, like, because there are things that remove petrify in the game, and yet it comes up like why you can't help them or save them, right? It's like, I love that stuff. I think the nitty gritty of it is really cool. I know it's a point of contention for this game for some people, but I don't know. I really like it. I think a narrative with weight and sacrifice is really, important in a game like this. Not every game has to have it, but I think if you want to create a game with like a deep and in-depth narrative, having those kinds of ups and downs are really kind of key. And it can feel a little condensed because it's only, I love saying only 25 hours. I wish most games were only 25 hours, but like, I think it is a little condensed here, but I think that's just like learning the ropes of complex storytelling in this way, and a limitation of the games, the system, the storage, maybe. I don't really think it's a flaw of the storytelling. I've not played the remake, which I hear is also actually quite good, the DS remake, and I do want to at some point, but like, I don't know. I really like it. I think that, there are no frivolous or useless characters in this game. I think they're all well done and portrayed and, well portrayed. You could argue that Kane is basically one note after the opening of the game, but beyond that, I think there's a lot of depth here if you really want to look for it, if you really want to dig deep on it.
I'm glad you brought up Tella, because that is pretty much the only death that has any weight in this game.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what I was alluding to with how haphazard this narrative feels, not only does it just move very quickly, but it also makes the characters seem really fucking incompetent. Like, they're just, like, this might be the dumbest cast in all of Final Fantasy. So yeah, I mean, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3 had character deaths. Of course, there's like no fanfare to it. Like, it's just something that happens. Like, you have one character, I can't remember the character. I think it's in Final Fantasy 3. I don't remember the character's name off the top of my head, but a boulder just falls on top of him and they're just like, oh, okay, well, bye. And then he's just never in the game again. Like, it's just, there's no like ceremony or anything. It just happens. And so, to be fair to this game, there's like more, the deaths are more pronounced here. And like, when they happen, like you said, like, what are their names? The twins? Porum?
Yeah.
Sorry. Like, when you're trapped in that room and, they petrify themselves to stop the walls from moving. And then like, when you go back there, when you go back to that part of the castle and see them, they're like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Like, they sacrifice themselves. Like, this was on their own terms. There's no way we can bring them back. And at the end of the game, they're just like, hey guys, we're back. Everything's okay. It's like, wait, what happened? Like, thought you couldn't. And then it turns out like, oh, the king is magical or something. He just fixed them. Like, wait, why didn't they just like explain things away? Like Cid's sacrifice when you're escaping the underside of
the Dwarven
planet,
Kingdom,
the underground area.
The Dwarven Kingdom.
Yeah. He like jumps off the airship with the bomb to like seal the hole in the earth. But it's like, so he dies. We think he dies, but then like, I don't know, not even an hour later, he's just like, nah, I'm fine. I needed to rest. was like, what the hell? Like, none of the deaths have any weight except for Tella. And I think he has like a great character arc. And this is also something that I've talked about previously, where like you play a lot of these old retro games. Even like I think I talked about it on my Pokemon Red and Blue episode, where I was like, as a kid playing these games, a lot of the empty spaces were filled in by your imagination. Like, you play a game like Final Fantasy IV now, and you're just like, oh yeah, I'm looking at these little cartoony sprites and whatever, and yeah, there's dialogue in here, but I mean, it may as well not be here because it's not anything particularly deep. It's not very special, whatever. But you really have to add to the characterization of the characterization of these characters' plots and their motives, and really like give them more emotion than what they actually have, in the same way you would look at like Super Mario World as a kid, and like kind of fill in the details of stuff that isn't there, where you're just like, and really kind of fleshing the world out so that it feels more fantastical than it actually is. And I think you kind of have to do that with Tella. And I agree with you that, like, yeah, the whole thing with Edward and then his daughter / Edward's wife or girlfriend, and that whole revenge arc that he goes through, and the fact that like he's such an old man, like he's this powerful mage, right? But like he's forgotten all of his spells. And so that's like, as you level him up and stuff, he starts learning those spells again. And then he also has to go learn Meteor, because there's several big bads of this game. This is also kind of the start of Final Fantasy being like, oh, it was this person all along that you just found out in the third act.
Yeah, basically that you have to kill a god in every game. And this was, I think, one of the earliest incarnations of that.
And so the fact he goes through like this whole revenge arc, and he, in the end, he's not as powerful as he thought he was, right?
But yeah, it's basically X-Death, right? Or whatever the equivalent of X-Death. Zemus. Yeah, he was using Golbez the whole time. Golbez was being controlled by him, and Golbez and Tella try to kill him, and I think Zemus kills Tella, as I recall. Yeah.
Tella, right. Okay, yeah. So it's at the very end of the game, yeah. And yeah, it's he does not come back. Everybody else who dies in this game comes back, and I just think this, like, all of that is just really deflating. I was just like, and I had kind of forgotten, like, I knew a couple of characters died in this game when I came back to it for the podcast. I did not remember how many of them actually came back, which is like all of them but Tella. And comparatively to Dragon Quest V, which sticks to its guns, that's all I'll say about that. This game is like, no, it's a happy ending for everybody except the old man. He is going to die anyway. He's old. It's fine.
Yeah, I guess maybe being further from it, my reading is more charitable. I think the deaths have impact in the moment. I agree that it does take a little of the punch away when you find out everyone's still alive, but you do only find that out at the very end. Like, you really think that Fabul and Polymenporum and like quite a few characters are gone, and they're gone, Sid. And I can see where you're coming from, but I don't know. I think the overall narrative is so strong. The final minutes with Zemus and everything are a little like, what? Wait, what? Wait, who's the bad guy? But that's not any different than the kind of anime nonsense that like I was used to consuming at that point anyway. And so I think that mostly, I think it really does still stick the landing. I mean, it's become one of my favorite Final Fantasies. I think for me, narratively, while those moments can feel deflating, I then think about characters like Cecil and Rydia and Edward, some of like the best characters with some of the most dynamic like stories, and like they evolve and change. And I think that carries more of the weight for me. I mean, Cecil is easily, I think, one of my favorite protagonists in the franchise. Like, I just really like his arc. I really like that you basically start this game as the bad guy, right? You're basically a knight for the Empire, and you wipe out an entire village except for one young girl, and that kind of wakes you up. You're like, wait, realizing that you're doing, and then it turns out the king's evil and wants the crystals, and like, I loved that. I think it's such a big twist on the classic, like, you're just the hero doing hero stuff. And it's pretty common now for narratives to have that, like, wait, are we the baddies kind of moment? But I felt like it was new for the time. And even still, I don't feel like it's super common. And so I really like that arc. And so I think while the kind of plot holes of magically everybody's okay at the end is frustrating, I think the journey mostly up to that point redeems the overall game for me. There are other Final Fantasies I've played that I rank higher than most people that I gave a similar explanation for. My love of 16 is known, and besides just being in love with Ben Starr like everybody else is, I think that game the core story of that game is great. It's just the side quests that mean nothing and a lot of the other world that's not great. But for me, I think having a core narrative or core characters that I really like can carry me through where there are weaker moments maybe in the overall narrative or the structure.
Final Fantasy, the series, is like one of my favorite series. It's one of my favorite franchises. Top 5, easily. But I have criticized every game for their story. And when I have to actually break it down on a podcast, I'm playing the game for a podcast, I'm going to be more critical than I otherwise would be. And so even just like zooming out from all of this, and this is something that I've said on Discord, I've said it online, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, other podcasts, where I'm like, the stories for Final Fantasy games are just silly nonsense. They start out, as you said, compelling enough, but then they just devolve into this, just nonsense, you know? Like even just the stuff with Golbez and Zemus, and I guess going back to when I said how like all these characters seem incredibly incompetent, it's like every time you think you're making progress, you're just like, okay, here we've got the crystal, and then all of a sudden Golbez shows up, he's like, nope, I've got the crystal, see you later, suckers. And then it's like, oh, okay, oh, also he stole Rosa. So it's like, okay, well now we have to go get Rosa back and get the next crystal, and then you show up to the next part, and then all of a sudden Golbez is like, no, and now Kain is my slave or whatever, and now we have this other crystal. It's like, no matter what you do, the villains are always just there. So it just seems like the characters in this game are either have like the worst fucking luck of any set of cast of characters, or they're just stupid. You know? So, and then you have the stuff with the Golbez and the Zemus stuff, and like Kain just happens to be puppeted only when the plot needs him to be puppeted. I think there's like 2 times where he like gets his mind taken over by Zemus. Yeah, there's just stuff where I'm just like, this is just becomes, it starts out really good with the whole Cecil basically starting out as a villain, which is like, again, to your point, there's so many games, especially in modern gaming, where you are just being guilt tripped the out of. The developers trying to make you feel bad for what you're doing. And I guess you could attribute that to starting in Final Fantasy IV, maybe. I guess, so my question for you, and I know I'm ranting here and I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. You mentioned Cecil's like one of your favorite Final Fantasy characters. Does his redemption arc work for you?
Yes. I think the redemption arc for him works for me because of how it's introduced, right? It's not heavy. Look, so something you got to remember, Keith, is like, this is where the tropes came from, right? Like, this is early enough. Like, probably in literature and movies, there were tropes like this long before it was in games. But I think at the time that this came out, pretty still uncommon in games for these kind of arcs, not at this depth, at least. We're starting to see it more. But I think it works because the dialogue is good enough that you believe Cecil feels bad. Like, it's very easy to believe that someone would just kind of go through the motions because they think up until that point they've been doing the right thing, because it's about perspective and like being faced with a very specific choice to have to, after wiping out the village, to also kill a child, right? It's like, that was his line and that's what stopped him. But the game doesn't go, are you going to kill a child? Are you a bad guy? Are you going to do it? It doesn't do that. It happens organically through the narrative. Kain wants to, finish the order. You stop him. She gets away. And then you run and you go back and you get turned in and disbarred. And like, I think it all happens in a way that's believable. And like, they don't this isn't like undoing for the sake of the plot. This is key to the plot. And then when he becomes a paladin, has to find himself, reconnects with Rosa, all of that stuff feels pretty authentic. You know, Kane's arc less so. He's kind of a moron or mind controlled. He's a jealous, like, and he says like it's jealousy. Like he just was jealous basically the whole time. That's why he really loved Rosa, which feels a weak narrative pull. But I do think that Cecil's arc works really well in this game. There are other parts that are definitely weaker than his, but I think his through line is one of the stronger ones, along with Tella and a few others.
Mm-hmm. I think it just went by too quickly. I feel like we could have lived more with him struggling with what he's been doing. I will say I do like how when the game starts, it feels like we're walking into a world that exists, if that makes sense. Like there's already history here. And we keep on bringing up Rosa, which is Cecil's love interest. And a lot of Final Fantasy games from here on out, there is a love story somewhere built into there. There's like a will they, won't they type of situation. But Cecil starts out dating somebody. He's already with
they're
somebody.
already
so
together.
That's what I mean. Like it already it feels like we're stepping into something that already exists. And that's what I really like about the way this game starts. The other thing that I wish they spent more time on is like this rivalry between Cecil and Golbez, because Golbez takes his place as part of the what do they call it, the Red Baron? I'm gonna get the army wrong. I was gonna say Red Ribbon Army. That's Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball. I mean, they're the Kingdom of Baron, so maybe the Red Baron.
The Kingdom of Baron.
Yeah.
Or are they called the Red Wings?
Red Wings. That's it. Yeah. Red Wings.
So he takes Golbez takes Cecil's place. It turns out at the end of the game, you find out that Cecil and Golbez are brothers. And I wish there was more. I wish there was more there, because it's something that just happens, and Golbez is not really in the game a lot. Again, he just shows up when the plot needs him to show up.
Yeah.
So I also wish there was something else there, because like when you find that out, it's pretty much like the end of the game. And it's like, okay, well, I don't know. There was really nothing narratively to like really say other than like, yes, Golbez is the big bad guy. He dresses in all black. He has black armor. He looks cool as hell.
Yeah.
But like, there's no tension between them, you know?
Right. Well, I get it. I mean, also we find out that Golbez is Cecil's father, which is like dropped at the last minute at the end.
Oh, is his father?
I believe so. Yeah.
I thought it was his brother.
Maybe you're right. Maybe it is brother. I thought it was father, but maybe you're right. They're brother. They're related.
They have familial relations. It's fine.
I think so. I hear your complaint, and I think if they found a way to flesh it out while keeping the story on track, it would work. But my hesitation to want to drag some of that out is this game moves at a good clip, but it felt good to play that way, right? I don't think if this was a longer game with more narrative, it would improve the game as a whole. I think because you're locked into these roles for the most part, or these variety of roles, there isn't class changing, there isn't a ton of grinding. Although I grinded the at the end because I wanted to overwhelm Zemus. I couldn't defend long enough to survive. So I was just like, well, what if I level myself by another 50 levels and then I'll just go stomp all over him, which I did. But I think that like you worry about my concern is like if you build it out, then that you have maybe fluff or too much bloat in the game. I think there's a balance, but I like that it was only about a 20-hour game, especially considering Final Fantasy only gets longer as they go on, But I can see how it does feel a little rushed But again, I mean, I'm also someone that when it comes to narratives, I don't feel that. Like a common complaint of the new Superman movie, which has nothing to do with this other than there's a lot going on and it moves too fast, is I was like, I don't know. I was able to follow it and I had a good time. Like, I don't know that, like, I think that's a valid complaint per person. I don't know if it's an end all be all take for a narrative, right? But I totally also get wanting you to get more out of these characters. I think they're all really interesting characters. It does feel like we don't know everything. But again, I think that also is kind of in line with what you're saying about liking it, feel like we're stepping into a world that exists, which basically becomes the MO for Final Fantasy going forward, right? With the exception, I think, of 16, which you do get to play as Clive as a kid. And like some of the background in 15, most of the Final Fantasy games are like this established world with these established characters, and you're stepping into the shoe of one or multiple of the leads. And I like that. I like in media res often because it just, I don't know, it feels like you're jumping into the action a bit. So I'm not going to say you're outright wrong, Keith, and that you should shut up because I wouldn't do that to you. I like you too much. But I can see where the complaint's coming from. I guess I'm just saying I didn't feel it. I felt like I had just the right amount of time for these characters, but I was also bought in and excited and having a good time. And so I think, and I've only played it once, so I could see maybe having some of these complaints having played it multiple times like you have, because you've really been able to sit with the narrative of the game from multiple perspectives since you've played the various versions of it too.
Yeah, I'll say, well, first, I did look it up. Golbez and Cecil are brothers.
Okay, great. So I was wrong. Good to know. Not perfect.
I wasn't calling you out. I wasn't like,
I'm like calling me out. It's fine. It's totally fine.
Okay. For the listener, so
Yes.
they're not like screaming into their car in traffic or wherever they listen to this.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, as far as the narrative goes, I mean, it's fine, right? I'm being critical of it because I'm being critical of it.
Yeah. I do have an additional note though on that. I think what strengthens the story for me is the world building, because I think the locations are really strong in this game, like the underground with the dwarves. You go to the goddamn moon, which was so awesome when you first get the airship and you're like, all right, we're going to go to the moon. I went, what? We're going where? We go to the moon? Like, that was awesome. I can't think of going to space in any other Final Fantasy. And so that was really cool for me. Like, those kinds of things I think also strengthened the game for me. Where the narrative failed, the world building I think was really, really strong.
Yeah, and there are towns that react to things that are going on in the game. I don't remember the name of the town, but there's a town that has bad standing with the Kingdom of Baron, and like you have been sent there multiple times to like their town up, and so when you arrive there with Cecil, they treat you like So
Yeah,
a lot of it is very grounded in its own world, and again, it's just that this stuff has existed before we even started playing the game. Maybe this is a good time to bring this up. Did you do any of the side quests in this game?
Yeah, I definitely did some of them, but I didn't spend a ton of time hunting down side quests. I definitely did a few, but like for the most part, I mainlined the main story.
Yeah, personally, I didn't for this playthrough. I didn't do all the side quests. Back in the day, I did, but this time I think, I don't think I didn't really go out of my way. I did find the one cave. I don't even remember what you get there. Real helpful information, right?
Yeah.
But it is just filled with Barbaros, and I was not going to be able to like every encounter was a Barbaro. There's like 2 or 3 of them. So it's not even, you're not even fighting one per encounter. And they rocked my like there was no way I was going to do this. So, and there are a couple parts in this game where I got my kicked in, and had to go grind a couple levels.
Basically, the whole final dungeon is like, if you're not the right level, you'll get your teeth kicked in by those dragons.
Yeah, and there's I don't know what it was, but you have to do the boss rush with the 4 or 5 elemental bosses.
Yep.
And they kicked my ass like the first 3 times, and I don't know why. Like, I don't know what was happening, but like, yeah, there are a couple points in here that are a little tough, but nothing like the previous 3 games, like not even close. But yeah, I mean, I know I've been really like nitpicking the death of this narrative, but I honestly don't have like too much of a problem with it. It's fine. It is breezy. Again, this is like a 20 to 25 hour RPG.
Yep.
Don't expect much, but also like, yeah, it's fine for what it is. I do want to end this section off with, of course, another retro recollection. It is from Lethco of the Afterglow podcast, who says, I played this one when I was younger, after 6, which is still my favorite of the series. I enjoyed it, but couldn't really beat it before I had to give it back to who I had borrowed it from because they were moving away. I managed to get to the lunar surface. I revisited it a few more times over the years, but never beat it till the Pixel remasters came out. And I spent a year beating Final Fantasy 1 through 7. After beating it, I feel this game focuses more on telling its story rather than character customization and making your own story. Granted, most video game RPGs are guilty of this, even games like the Elder Scrolls series. But I felt like this was more on rails than the others. That's not a bad thing, as the game is like watching a good movie. Thank you, Lethco, and I think both you and I agreed on most of those points, Matt.
I mean, it was a good way of like fine-tuning it, right? Like Lethco said in that last sentence, what we've been saying for the last 40 minutes. Like, it's like watching a good movie, right? Turns out the podcasters are more verbose than that. But yeah, I like that explanation, right? It does make sense. And yeah, I mostly agree. I think that's what kept me hooked, is that it did feel like a good movie or a popcorn flick, right? Not even like high art cinema, but just a good popcorn flick that you're like invested in the characters of.
And think about how we even got into talking about the story. The way the game mechanics are of shifting the party members in and out, right?
Yeah.
And just how well that works, not only mechanically, but also with the story. And I'm totally fine with the game being on rails and it kind of telling the story it wants me to experience, even if I don't think that story is entirely like deep or anything, or again, not really looking for Final Fantasy IV to deliver that kind of stuff to me, but totally fine if it's taking me on a ride. About the next section here, which is going to be audio and visual, of course. So again, this is still like in tandem with what I would be talking about development wise. I know we really got off there on the story, which is, I knew that was going to be the chunk of this episode, right? But this was like the first time where Yoshitaka Amano's concept art could actually be translated directly into sprites. They didn't have the technology to like actually like scan his stuff in, mess around with them. Like, these were like painstakingly reinterpreted as pixelated sprites. With that said, even looking at just like the gameplay of the original release, not going off the Pixel remaster, this game looks fantastic. Does it look as great as like Final Fantasy V or 6? No, but again, comparing it to Dragon Quest V, which was Enix's first Super Famicom release, this is like much more detailed than Dragon Quest V. I love Dragon Quest V, but that game just looks like a Nintendo game on a Super Nintendo, honestly. So yeah, this is, I already talked about, Golbez's design looks insane until he's at your party and then he just looks like a little chibi guy. Doesn't look as cool when he's in your team, but yeah, man, the monster design is incredible.
It's pinnacle sprite work to me. I joined you for F-Zero. I may or may not be joining you for another SNES game down the line. And like every time I return to a Super Nintendo game, I just go, this is perfect. I wouldn't change anything, right? There's something about pixel art that really does hold up. It's why the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance are two of my favorite consoles, because they were intricately designed. The games for those consoles were intricately designed for 16-bit and 32-bit graphics in mind, and really really overdid it on the detail in a way that I think is just incredible. And you could just do more on these consoles than you could on the NES. There were plenty of games on the NES that look good too because of like the dedication to conveying that art. But for sure, Final Fantasy IV looks great. And like, while I did play, the Pixel remaster, which does improve, like, you know, adds widescreen, improves some of it, like, it's still mostly using basically the same sprites. They've cleaned some stuff up, but there's no pixel smoothing garbage, thank God. They really let these sprites look like how they're supposed to look. And going back to the Super Nintendo version, there's a little bit of lost fidelity. Of course, there's going to be a difference, but like for the most part, it's basically the same stylistically for sure. And I just love this art style. I don't mind polygonal graphics. I like the PlayStation era and the N64 era, and there's a lot to love there about the stylized nature of it. But there's something about especially pixel graphic RPGs. It's why I love all of the HD 2D remaster games, you know, like Triangle Strategy and Octopath Traveler. I even started earlier this year playing Dragon Quest III 2D HD remake. God, that title is too long. They couldn't have thought of a quicker way to get to the point on that one. But like, I love that style, and so I eat this up, and I think it looks great, and like it sounds great too. I know we'll get to that in a minute, but like I really do love the design. And like you mentioned the enemy sprites, like the behemoth, which I think has existed since the first game. Like this is the first game I really remember seeing sprite art where it's like, this is what the behemoth looks like. And is a terrifying creature that will go on to kick your ass in every Final Fantasy game you play, not just this one. But I really like seeing classic Final Fantasy villains in pixel art form when I was used to seeing them in the 3D graphics of 7, 8, and 9 was also really awesome. And that their designs, while getting more in depth and more detailed, haven't changed that much for a lot of them. A lot of the classic characters and villain and enemies look similar because they kind of nailed it here and then just kind of expanded on it as they could do more graphically.
Yeah, there's something about the battle screens of these classic Final Fantasy games that I love. And I think there's something about the stark contrast because I think of course you have the iconic blue menu, which I don't know if you can change it in the Pixel remaster. I don't remember. Of course you have the iconic, you know, blue menu and stuff like that when you're in battle, but also like the original version of the game has like, it uses these blues and like these different shades of blues, and like there's like a stark blackness to some of the outlines, especially with the some of the scenery has it, but it's especially in a lot of the enemy sprites that it's just like, man, there's something about it. There's just so much nostalgia in that like style for me. I can't explain it. Like it just looks so good. Like, and then you have the final boss, which is just like this grotesque galactic monstrosity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so cool looking. And then of course you have like the Mode 7 outer space stuff. We haven't even really talked a lot about Mode 7 surprisingly, but that's kind of like the only time Mode 7 is really used in battle is when they're doing the background stuff of you like flying through outer space.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the Mode 7 stuff, actually, since I mentioned it, comes up when you're in the either flying the space whale or any of the airships, because you're just kind of flying around the map and stuff like that. There's some other subtle uses of it here and there, but that's mainly where you're gonna see it. But yeah, man, I mean, it's tough. This is like a fantastic looking game to me. I know some people are there's those people out there who don't care for sprites. I just feel like this isn't peak, obviously. This isn't peak pixel work. We're going to get there. This is very early on in the Super Nintendo lifespan. So this isn't like breaking any ground or anything like that, but it's still, to me, it's up there. I still think it looks fantastic, even to this day. And then, of course, we got to talk about the soundtrack. This was actually the first Final Fantasy soundtrack that was actually released on an album, which was released on June 14th, 1991, which was a month before the game. One of the themes that we really didn't talk about much when we were talking about the story, we kind of got there, but we're talking about relationships, just like the characters interacting with each other. And we talked about, obviously, the reveal with Cecil, and then we talked about his relationship with Rosa. So there's that theme there. Coincidentally, there's a song called The Theme of Love, which actually became such a huge hit in Japan that they started teaching it in music classes.
Incredible.
So yeah, you start up the game right away. You get, the Final Fantasy IV text or whatever, and you get the prelude, which is like the best sounding. Comparatively to the first 3 games, which I'm comparing this to because those are the last games I covered, right? This is, oh man, it's so good. It's like the first time where you hear like kind of the full prelude as we know it. Like it has like the different harmonies in it, and it's like way more orchestrated. Before this, it was just incredibly basic, and it's just like right away, like I'm in. I'm ready to play this game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what we're going to really say that hasn't already been said about Nobuo Uematsu. I mean, he's a legend for a reason. And like,
right?
And I will go to bat that this is one of the best battle themes in Final Fantasy history. I've been hearing it long before I ever played this game.
Really?
Well, for one, deep in my heart, I love the Black Mages, which is the metal band that Nobuo Uematsu is in with a bunch of other Final Fantasy composers that play heavy metal versions of Final Fantasy songs, which if you've never looked up their version of the Genova theme, oh my God, incredible. But like, so I'd been hearing that version of this battle theme, and like, it's just ingrained to me. I mean, I really love the 7 soundtrack. I love a lot of the soundtracks, but I don't know, there's something that feels really special about this battle theme to me. But that said, the whole soundtrack is incredible, fits the mood, the theme of love. All of the songs in this game, it's a Nobuo Uematsu soundtrack, right? Like they are meant to invoke emotions. Like love or hate 7, Eris's theme invokes emotion, full stop, right? The music is gorgeous, right? You can hate that game all you want, think Sephiroth is a B-tier villain, but that song and his composition is elevated, right? And I even hear, I mean, even in the first Final Fantasy, as much as I hated that game, like the music was, for a Nintendo game especially, not that Nintendo games can't have great soundtracks, but like, the quality of the sound chip, you can only do so much. But yeah, I love this soundtrack a ton, and I agree. From the moment you hit the title screen, it's like, oh, here we go, right? But even every town's theme, the underground, the airship theme, all of it, right? And then you hear themes that are like the Chocobo theme in this, right? The Chocobo theme's basically been in every game in some version or another. I love all of that. And I do like that you can hear the bones of what'll be the later orchestrated versions in the later games, even here, right? The themes, the tones, the leitmotifs, all of it. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to say if this is my favorite soundtrack, but that said, I don't think there's such a thing as a bad Final Fantasy soundtrack. I even think of the games that I like a lot less, like 8, for example. 8 has a killer soundtrack. Like that's the one thing you cannot deny about that game. So like, I really like, I'm happy to dive deep on each, whatever tracks you want, but like full stop, Nobuo Uematsu is probably one of the best composers working besides Yoko Shimomura, who is probably my number one. And this game is one of the reasons why I continue to re-fall in love with his music as I play these games that I haven't even played before. And the orchestrated versions though I used a lot of the classic music, the orchestrated versions are also absolutely masterfully done.
Yeah, I feel like part of me did myself a little bit of a disservice not at least checking out those orchestrated versions during while I played the Pixel remaster. I think you can switch them mid-game, right?
You can. I think it's in the menus. I mean, but I get it. Like when I played the Super Mario RPG remake, I spent like more than half the game playing with the classic soundtrack because like Yoko Shimomura's work just felt flawless. The recompositions were great, which she did. She did her own recompositions. So it's not like it was a different composer, but like I have trouble if there's any kind of nostalgia or just because I love chiptune music, it's hard for me to want to engage in the newer stuff sometimes, but they were well done. I mean, it's not like you didn't listen because you weren't going to like them, right? You just had the nostalgia for the original version. It's not like any music by this man is going to be good, basically.
You're going to hear, this isn't like a knock against the soundtrack, but you're going to be hearing a lot of the same songs over and over again. So I probably could have just switched over at some point and been like, yeah, okay, I've heard this song enough. I could probably change it to the orchestrated version. I didn't do that, but I don't have any notes about any songs specifically. Other than that, I mean, you said this is your favorite battle theme, but is there any other like tracks that stick out to you for any reason or another?
I mean, I love a lot of the character themes too. I like that. I can't speak to 1 through 3, but I feel like this is one of the first games where like each of the characters really have their own theme. And like I don't remember what Cecil's theme is called, but like all of the music involved in when you're becoming the paladin and you're facing yourself. Like I love that whole scene, not just because of how it's written and how it's framed, but because of the music during that part as well.
Yeah, Uematsu does a lot of, he holds a lot of the narrative on his back through the way he composes for those specific scenes. And I think it's something, again, I talked about my Dragon Quest V episode where it's kind of the opposite, where the narrative is incredibly strong and the soundtrack kind of works in its favor. Not that I think there's anything particularly wrong with Dragon Quest V soundtrack, but I think where Uematsu and I guess specifically Sakaguchi, where they both shine, is just how well they work together, and where Uematsu, I feel like he knows, like when something incredibly important is happening, he's going to make you feel it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
He's only going to highlight it even more. And he's very good at it. And so I think that's why I think like a lot of Final Fantasy games as a whole, I guess narratively, aren't as remembered as any one point in those specific games. You know, like everybody remembers the thing that happens in Final Fantasy VII, right? But there's a couple specific scenes in Final Fantasy VI that are remembered forever. I mean, I guess I don't have to, I could bring up at least the opera scene, right, at the beginning of the game. So there's always like these scenes dotted around Final Fantasy games, whereas I feel like in contrast, stuff like in the Dragon Quest series, the games are more remembered for their narrative as a whole. Is that any of that makes sense? I know we're going off of graphics and audio to back to story again, but
no, I mean, it does make sense. And I think the soundtracks, like I could probably, not this moment, but when I was at my peak of listening to the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack over and over again, could probably name each and every track besides Genova's theme. But like, I think it like, to me, Final Fantasy is the Star Wars of video games, in the sense that Star Wars is a compelling narrative, interesting characters, and a great story. But what holds all of that together is the John Williams score. Those movies would be less than without John Williams' score. And I feel very strongly about the Final Fantasy games as well, that they're very good games, sometimes great or incredible games. But I think what gets them to great and incredible is the soundtrack, is the sound design, you know, all of, like, because again, Nobuo Uematsu is making very deeply emotional and compelling music that existed in games, but like even soundtracks that I love from the NES, like the DuckTales soundtrack or the Mega Man soundtracks, like those were boppy and entertaining, but I didn't find them necessarily compelling, right? Except maybe the opening to Mega Man 2 is pretty compelling. But like,
it's great.
It's just, but it's different, right? You understand what I'm saying, right? Like these are deeply meant to invoke emotion, and basically every track does, whether it's adrenaline for the action or, you know, the theme of love and this deep, like, devotion and thoughtfulness, right? All of these things are meant to invoke emotion that just help enhance the storytelling.
Yeah, I agree. I also want to, like, there's like a softness to the soundtrack, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And I think that's maybe just because of the sound chip, but there's like the softness to it, and like in tandem with the visuals, it just, I don't know, it just hits me in the, like, the perfect way, you know. This is a JRPG I grew up playing. I don't know what else to say, you guys. It's very hard for me to like separate my bias as far as the visuals and the audio go here. So
that's legit.
No facts, all feelings. Sorry.
Exactly. Oops, all feelings. You can blame me.
We'll end this section again with retro recollection here from Masked Keaton, who says, "This game literally changed my life and kicked off an RPG obsession that lasted 20 years. When the sequel dropped on the Wii, I legit teared up playing it, seeing all the classic locations and sprites again. Great soundtrack too." Which is also a good segue into our next section. Thank you, Keaton, on the release timeline and the different versions and ports of this game. Final Fantasy IV was, of course, released in Japan for the Super Famicom on July 19th, 1991. It was released here in the States for the Super Nintendo in November of 1991, again as Final Fantasy II. And the remakes and ports. There was a PlayStation port, part of the Final Fantasy Anthology. There was the Game Boy Advance port, the DS, Nintendo DS remake, which came out in 2007. PlayStation Portable had a port of this as part of the Complete Collection. It also got ported to mobile. And then, of course, we mentioned the Pixel Remaster. Other than the Pixel Remaster, you're not familiar with any other ports of this, correct?
So, I mean, I've familiarized myself with them in the sense that, like, I know how the remake looks, and like I've looked up the other versions, but I've not played the other versions to completion. I've only played the Pixel Remaster.
Yeah, same. I've seen the FF Anthology stuff, but otherwise, yeah, I'm not too familiar with any of the other ports aside from the Pixel Remaster. So, something I mentioned earlier and was not aware of until. One, I read Masked Keaton's retro recollection, and two, I did the did the research rather, was that there was a sequel, Final Fantasy IV: The After Years, which follows Cecil's son as the protagonist, and that was released on mobile, WiiWare, and PSP as well. Got mixed reception, very heavy on the fan service apparently. Have you checked this out?
I haven't. I have it. It's actually available on Steam as well. And so I do have it wishlisted on Steam. And I've wanted to play it, but I haven't gotten to it yet. The intent was to try and pick it up and play it after finishing the game, but you know how it goes. You don't always follow through with that stuff. And so I do want to play it. I think I would tie myself to replaying 4 first to like really connect it to the after years, but I am curious about it. I've heard mixed things, but I think ultimately a lot of folks, like a friend of mine, the host of RPG University, Scott White, really talks it up. He says if you like 4, the after years you'll enjoy because it does build out that world, and so if you like those characters in that world, there's a lot to love. So I have been curious.
Yeah, I gotta wonder how much more context it gives narratively to the original game. Not a huge fan of milking a franchise or anything like that, so I'm not like dying to play this sequel.
One sequel is not milking a franchise, Keith.
Listen, man.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
How many different spin-offs of Final Fantasy do we need, really?
I would argue that some of the spin-offs are pretty good, but that's for another day.
I'm just one of those. I just don't need it. I don't need it in my life. Let's
get it.
Let's go to the next section, which we can kind of breeze through, which is basically just the localization and the differences between some of the versions. Again, already brought up, this was called Final Fantasy II here because we didn't actually get Final Fantasy II, just switched it over. I don't know if you've heard of this. There's basically a version out there called the Easy Type version, which was Final Fantasy IV. I don't know how to. First of all, let me backtrack. Have you heard of Easy Type?
I have not.
Okay, so Easy Type is a simplified version, basically, of Final Fantasy IV. So we got Final Fantasy II, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Japan was like, hey, we made Final Fantasy IV easy. There's a slight difficulty balance for us Americans because we're pussies, I guess. We can't handle JRPGs. So they simplified Final Fantasy II. And then kind of like what they did with Mario 2 and Doki Doki Panic, but like reverse, was they took the American Final Fantasy II, brought it to Japan, and dumbed it down even further, and basically called it Final Fantasy IV Easy Type in Japan.
Oh, this now, yeah, with the context, it sounds familiar. I've definitely heard of this before.
That's crazy, because the game's already not very hard to begin with. I gotta, like, is there even any leveling? Like, what's going on in that version of the game that maybe, I guess the enemies just have reduced HP pools or something? I don't know.
Yeah, I've not played it, but my guess is you do more damage, they do less damage, that kind of thing, maybe.
And then of course the port that we got, there was censorship to religion. A lot of the deaths were like even more dumbed down. There's even less weight to them, if you could believe. But then of course the script was severely butchered. So just kind of the differences between the Final Fantasy II that we got and the Final Fantasy IV that we should have got. And then we can close this out with another retro recollection from our friend Eric over at the Unlockables, who says, I haven't played this yet, but 5 to go before the best one. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, sure. I mean, I love 9. 9 is up there for me, having played it through for the first time on the Switch. But yeah, not what we're here to talk about today, bud. Appreciate you though.
Moving on to the last section that I have here before we get into the game, the influences that shaped Final Fantasy IV and have also shaped JRPGs and kind of its legacy that we can talk about a little bit. I already mentioned earlier just how much this game did for just JRPGs, period. There's a lot of internal cross-pollination at Square. The staff that created Final Fantasy IV would eventually go on to create Seiken Densetsu. They would go on to create Chrono Trigger, Saga Frontier, Live Alive, and then of course you get Final Fantasy V. A lot of people worked on 6, and of Eric's favorite game, Final Fantasy IX. And yeah, I think this Final Fantasy IV was really like the project that gave Square the confidence, the creative confidence to really lead the RPG genre. It really kind of created the template for a lot of RPGs in the 90s from this point forward.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the early blueprints. I feel like 1, 2, and 3, especially 1 and 2 are similar to each other. 3 really sets the groundwork for like the class system and all of that. But I think this is one of the early, like we were saying earlier, like really sets the groundwork to influence storytelling going forward and how to tell stories in these games.
Yeah, I mentioned sorry to bring this up. People should go listen to this episode. But I mentioned in my Dragon Quest V episode that without Dragon Quest, there's no Final Fantasy. It doesn't happen at all. And in an interview, Sakaguchi literally states, and here it is, folks, if it weren't for Dragon Quest, there wouldn't be Final Fantasy. That is the quote. And I'm glad I can bring it up. Like, there it is. And so, yeah, just, again, Dragon Quest's dominance of the Japanese market just felt like it was like a measuring stick for Final Fantasy's success. There's also influence from Ys, which I did not know about until I did the research. I guess Sakaguchi was playing a ton of Ys at the time, which helped to inspire him on how to create like the dungeons for this game and how the narrative would flow in Final Fantasy IV, which I thought was kind of interesting. And, we talked about the beautiful accident, I guess you could say, of how the original Final Fantasy IV was canceled for the Famicom. Do you think Final Fantasy IV would have made as much of an impact if it was made for the Famicom or the NES?
I don't think so. I think that a lot of the storytelling and the expansion of what a Final Fantasy game is that we got here, I think only happens with the better hardware. Especially you talked about the sprite work earlier and how detailed it was. I just don't know that we would have such intricate character storytelling on the NES. Not that it's not possible, but I don't think we get the same exact game just in a demake version. I think the reason we got the game we got was because it was on the Super Famicom and then the SNES.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of thinking through my own answer to my own question because I really didn't have one. I just was curious. I mean, you would say Super Mario Brothers 3 is influential, right? And that's a pretty late.
Sure. Yeah, that's
a pretty late NES game, and that did a lot of stuff. But also different genres, I suppose. There's a lot more going on in an RPG than there is a platforming game. So I suppose a lot of those systems can kind of get in the way. I mean, it's funny to think about because people don't typically think of these type of things, but because I've covered so many of these games, it's like you forget that even just like having menus populate the screen on an NES was a problem. Like I just mentioned Super Mario Brothers 3. The inventory bar at the bottom that's constantly on the bottom of the screen of Super Mario Brothers 3, like that was a massive innovation. Like there's a lot of games that could not figure out how to do that until the team at EAD figured out how to do that. And so for a game like Final Fantasy IV to have all these different types of menus pop up, and especially the ATB system, and having to constantly be in tandem with that thing or sync up with that thing would be probably incredibly difficult on the NES. So. Are you ready?
I mean, are we ever really ready in this big wide world for all the things that we have to do? I'm sorry, I'm getting existential. Yes, I'm ready.
Considering everything that's happening in this world, this won't be as bad as
well,
that.
That's good because it's pretty bad out here.
Promise.
Let's be real.
Yeah. Before we cap this episode off, of course, we have to play a game. And this is a game that I would like to call Sorry I Tried to Kill You That One Time. I am going to give you 10 sets of 3 characters.
Okay.
Name off 3 characters here.
Uh-huh.
One of these characters had some sort of arc where they were once a villain, but then later become your best friend forever. Your BFF. All you have to do is tell me which character starts bad, but then turns good.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense.
Yes. Question 1, or I guess it's not a question. Set of characters.
Group 1.
Group 1. Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We're going to start easy here. Shadow the Hedgehog, Wario, or Ganondorf?
Well, yeah, I guess it's got to be Shadow. Like Wario, you get to play as, but he's never really becomes a good guy. He's always an asshole. Where Shadow does fight with the hero team. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yep.
You did that first one just for me because I'm the Sonic sicko that I am.
Yeah, I figured. Yeah, it would start out easy to give you, give you a softball to hit out of the park. Okay. Group 2 here, we've got Ridley. I guess I should say where these people are from, right? In case you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I probably will, but yeah.
Okay, so we got Ridley, of course, from Metroid. Axel from Kingdom Hearts, and Dracula from Castlevania.
Well, this one's Axel. I'm too big of a Kingdom Hearts sicko to not know that.
That is true. Thank you, Eric, for that question. He may or may not have helped me with this one, actually. So,
amazing.
Group 3 here. We have Magus from Chrono Trigger, Bowser from Mario,
Yeah, from everything.
yeah. And Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid.
I mean, technically 2 of them could be, but I think you're looking for Magus.
I am looking for Magus.
Yeah.
I mean,
but Bowser becomes a hero in Super Mario RPG and basically half of the RPG games. So like,
that's not canon.
I guess he's never really a hero. Well, and even if it were, he's not really a hero in RPG. He makes you join the Koopa, like his troops. So technically you're becoming a bad guy. But anyway, just I wouldn't be me if I didn't nitpick.
Totally fine. Totally fine. This is why I needed help with the quiz specifically, because I was like, because we were trying to iron out all the details. We're just like, yeah, but we were getting into the technicalities of these characters. But yeah, group 4, we have Albert Wesker from Resident Evil, Vas Montegro. Am I saying that right? Vas Montegro from Far Cry 3, and General Beatrix from Final Fantasy 9.
Well, I mean, it's funny. Like, I remember that Beatrix joins you towards the end of the game, but I also know those other 2 characters are villains through and through. So yeah, Beatrix.
Yes, that is correct, sir. Group 5, we have Kefka from Final Fantasy 6, Knuckles from, again, Knuckles. It's Mario. He's from Mario, right?
Right, exactly.
And Handsome Jack from Borderlands.
So interestingly, Handsome Jack starts as a good guy and then becomes a bad guy. But Knuckles would be the answer to this. My favorite Sonic character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you get 2 Sonic ones in here. Honestly, there's a lot of characters that start out off as villains in Sonic games and become your best friends.
Sonic and Goku basically have the same effect on their cast.
Yeah. I think
they slowly turn them all good.
I think originally, oh no, whoa! I almost gave one away. I thought I took it out of here. Never mind.
Okay.
Next we have the Arbiter from Halo 2, Liquid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 2, and Donkey Kong from Donkey Kong.
Okay.
So again, we're dealing with technicalities here. Remind me who the first one was again?
The Arbiter from Halo 2.
Well, I mean, it's the Arbiter from Halo 2. Arbiter and Master Chief team up. So
yes,
yeah.
that is
Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong's technically a good guy in his own stories, but not Mario's stories.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I didn't really think about that actually. Next, we have Goro from Mortal Kombat. I don't even know what this character is. You can tell I made this one. Arthas Menethil? Warcraft 3?
Yeah, Arthas. Is it Arthas? I thought Minas Tirith, but yeah, Arthas, yes. I know who Arthas is, so yes,
Okay.
It's from Warcraft and from World of Warcraft, technically also.
Okay, great. Perfect. At least one of us knows. And I made the quiz.
I got you.
And Vulcan Raven from Metal Gear Solid.
Who is the first one again?
Goro from Mortal Kombat.
Man, I'm inclined to say none of these, but it's got to be Arthas. Oh, really?
Man, you're so
So close for perfect.
Yeah. The answer I was looking for was Vulcan Raven from Metal Gear
Oh,
Solid.
see, I'm a Kojima hater, and I don't like I've never played a Metal Gear Solid, so that was my downfall.
Okay.
But Arthas is another one where starts as a good guy, becomes a villain, he becomes the Lich King, and I flipped it.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Set 8. Oh, I said I had 10 sets. I only have 9 apparently. Okay. Well, you only get 9. Set 8. Jetstream Sam from Metal Gear Rising, Vile from Mega Man X, and Silver the Hedgehog from Sonic 06.
Silver. I know Silver becomes a good guy. I played Sonic Forces like everybody else.
Like everybody else.
Well, like a handful of people did.
Yeah. This was. I thought I took this one out. Apparently, I did not, because I was like, Matt's going to get all these Sonic ones.
Yep.
The final one, apparently, Kratos from God of War, the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3, and oh boy, here's another one. No idea. Saren Atreus
from Mass Effect. Yeah, Saren. He's the first villain in Mass Effect. Obviously, the answer to this one is Kratos.
You're all going to die down
That's
here.
the wrong. That's the wrong one.
Oh no.
It is the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3.
No, again, downfall. Oh, right. Kratos, I guess, is always a good guy. Look, but like I said, Metal Gear Solid was going to be my downfall because I'm a Kojima hater.
She is technically the villain, but everything she did was for a country, Matt. You have to understand that she was actually the good guy.
I see.
The good girl, the good woman. Anyway, it's the boss.
Yeah.
Man, you were on a roll here.
Yeah.
Really slipped up with the Metal Gear stuff.
I'll take 7 out of 9, though. That ain't bad.
No, not at all. But now I know your weakness. So the next time I have you on the show, we'll see what happens.
It's going to be all Metal Gear Solid. You're going to just be like, tell me if this character by this wacky name is Metal Gear Solid or not, or whatever. You're welcome. You can have that game for free.
But yeah, good job, Matt. You did it.
Hell yeah.
This has been Sorry I Tried to Kill You that one time. Before we close this off, I have just 2 more retro recollections that I would like to leave everybody with tonight. The first one comes from Chris Copleen of Retro Hangover, who says, "My favorite Final Fantasy, and perhaps the most important in terms of how Final Fantasy would establish itself as a franchise, most obviously with its battle system, and settling into a more narrative-driven experience. Final Fantasy IV feels like a culmination of sorts when you consider the entries prior to it. In many ways, it feels like the developers took their favorite classes from Final Fantasy III, made characters D&D style for them, and then wrote a campaign. It was still at a point, too, where Final Fantasy could make changes to its gameplay, and it felt like natural progression and advancement of a formula, rather than some trend-chasing bastardization, using that historical progression as a shield from criticism. It's brilliant in its simplicity, a typical high fantasy story with incredible pacing and music, and it's a must-play for the SNES. Do this right, Keith." Why is it gotta end with a threat, Chris?
I mean, he knows you pretty well, so I'm just saying.
We're gonna end this with, and I don't know how to say their name, if I'm gonna be honest. XTOS? Xtos? Zodus? I'm not really sure. Get back to me on that. They say, "Bless the crystals."
Bless them indeed.
Thank you guys. Thank you for writing in. And that just leaves Matt and I to discuss whether or not we would recommend checking out Final Fantasy IV in 2025. And Matt, I'll begin with you. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, like I'm not going to mince words. Yes. Like I think it's not only worth playing in 2025, especially with the existence of the Pixel remasters, but I think it's a great starting point for Final Fantasy also. Like, look, 1 and 2 are important in the same way that Metroid 1 and 2 are important. And there's some reasons to play Metroid 2, but there is 0 reason to play Metroid 1 on the NES. That game is impossible. Besides curiosity.
I'm giving you a virtual high five.
Yeah. Like,
hell yeah, brother.
I love that franchise. Metroid's one of my favorite franchises of all time, but people are like, you have to play the first one. No, you play Zero Mission, the actual good version of that game. But we're not here to talk about Metroid. Not yet, anyway. But yeah, I think this is a great starting point. I think if you want to play 1 and 2 for curiosity's sake, I'm sure the Pixel remasters have some great quality of life stuff. 3, I think is worth probably playing on some level just to see the diversity of the class system. But 4, if you want, like, if you are a Final Fantasy fan now and you want to play one of the classics because you've never played them, start with 4. It's got the kind of storytelling you're used to. It'll have a combat system that seems somewhat familiar, and I think you'll really enjoy it. But yeah, if you're a new Final Fantasy fan who's never played any of the games, since it's an anthology series, absolutely start with 4. I think it's a great one to start with, especially since, from what I hear, 6 is considered one of the best of the classics, and from what I played of it, I would agree. But yeah, I think 4 is absolutely worth playing today. I think it holds up masterfully, both in the Pixel remaster version, but also the classic version. From what I went back and double checked some of it. Like I said, watched some playthroughs and stuff. And I think both versions absolutely hold up. But like, there's also the DS remake. Like, there's also so many different ways you can play this game. And I've heard all of them are excellent versions. Just don't play any PlayStation ports of Super Nintendo games. Those always suck because the load times are insane. But yeah, I highly recommend this game. It's easily in my top 5 Final Fantasy games of all time. And I haven't played the entire franchise yet. And I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, for the first time on this show, I can say without hesitation that I fully recommend a Final Fantasy game. Finally. Yes, absolutely. I think you should play this game. Like, for a lot of the same reasons that you just mentioned. Not because it's the first one in the series that isn't a completely broken mess, but because it is one of the most approachable JRPGs that you can jump into, even as just a casual player of video games. This game is not buried under overly complex systems. The story is straightforward enough to follow without needing a Wikipedia entry open or something. The visuals and the music do like a beautiful handshake here. I'm not going to keep going on. I nitpick the story to hell because that's what I do, but there's really no other problems with it. And it's also like very accessible now. You can go play the Pixel remaster pretty much whenever you want, and it's pretty faithful to the 1991 release. So, I mean, you're getting some quality of life updates here and there, but for the most part, it's exactly as how it was released in 1991. So, yeah, go for it. I think you should play Final Fantasy IV. With that said, Matt, I really appreciate you showing up for a second time. I know it's been a few weeks between recordings here, but for listeners, it will not have been that long. So I really appreciate you taking the time out.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Hopefully your listeners don't get sick of me. I mean, I know a few of them. So like Chris, I'm on to you. I don't know why I like calling out Chris Copeland on a variety of podcasts. It's just fun, mostly because I actually love Chris to death. But yeah,
he does it to us all the time.
I mean,
it's only fair.
It's true. He does call us out a lot. But yeah, no, I'm glad that I've gotten to know you over this last year, and like it's been a pleasure to guest on the show. I'm an avid listener and a fan, and it's fun to talk this deep about games. And like I said, you've become my favorite person to argue with, not because I don't agree with you a lot, but also because like I understand when you're coming from when you don't like something. You're my favorite kind of critic because you have reasons and logic. I can't stand people online who just go, this thing sucks because it sucks. Like there's no engagement there. There's no understanding. There's no, like, I like shows like this because you get into the nitty gritty of why you think something is bad or why you don't enjoy it. And I appreciate that. And it's always a thoughtful conversation. So I'll come back anytime you ask, and spoiler alert, based on some, previews left in this, if you leave them in, I will be back. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger famously said that, right? I'll be back.
I thought that was the Ninja Turtles.
Oh, right. The Ninja Turtles famously said, I'll be back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're very, he's not Norwegian. Anyway.
Oh my God. Time to go to bed.
Yeah, right. Podcasts are very, they're great for conversation and actually having these more in-depth conversations. And that's why I like doing it. And I guess if people are big Final Fantasy IV fans, but not F-Zero fans, and they haven't listened to that episode for whatever reason, remind the good people where they can actually find you on the internet.
Happy to. So the best place to go is djstormageddon.com. That goes to my link tree, which has the links to both of my podcasts, Fun and Games, which is a broader topic-based discussion podcast that I host with Jeff Moonen, and Reignite, which is a play-along podcast that started as a Mass Effect play-along where what if we stepped in Shepard's shoes and made decisions as if we were Commander Shepard. We have now moved on beyond. We've played Andromeda and now moved on to the Dragon Age franchise, and we are currently in the shoes of one Hawk in Dragon Age 2. So if that sounds interesting, I do that with the incredible Frankie Bradley Lestrange. And then like I sometimes stream. I'm in the Main Quest Discord. I'm in a bunch of different Discord communities if you want to hang out and chat. And I'm often on Blue Sky. I'm most active under also djstormageddon.com, where I post my very good and correct all the time gaming takes.
Yeah, and of course I back everything that Matt does on the internet. They're incredible podcast hosts, incredibly gracious. They even let people take over their own podcast on Fun and Games and talk about what you have at the Side Quest series, right?
Correct. And you did an episode on A Link to the Past.
Right. Yeah. Which people
another
may or
game
may
you
not have heard
actually
already,
liked.
but every time you've been on, we've completely agreed on. Oh no, we didn't agree on Sonic CD.
No, but you weren't far off from us. I feel like we were like sort of in a similar vein.
Same wavelength, kind of, but different ends.
I'm more lenient than you are. You're much crueler than I am. That's what it comes down to. I'm the good cop. You're the bad cop. But all cops are bad, so it doesn't matter.
But if for whatever reason at this point you're not familiar with Matt, which I would find hard to believe, you should go check out everything that they do on the internet. It's great stuff.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
With that said, I mean, this has been as long of a podcast as I thought it was going to be when we started. And because of that, I'm going to be stepping away for a few weeks. But do not worry, I'm not going to go too far. While I'm out, I will be pulling a full-length episode out of the Patreon vault. And it's going to be covering another landmark RPG in its own right. And it's something that I talked about, again, Patreon exclusive, a full-length episode on Golden Sun. And after that, oh boy, get ready. The Ghoulcade is returning in full force. So until then, take care of yourselves and always remember, it's okay to like a video game.